Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today on a Wednesday. We are presented by Gatorade. Thrilled to have you with us. Dave Revson, very pleased to be joined as I am every Wednesday by my good friend Ashley Adamson. Ashley, I do not know about you, but the college football playoff rankings that came out last night kind of confirmed my worldview. The Big Ten with four of the top five teams. That worldview may have just a smidgen of bias, just a little bit, but man, it was pretty to see.
You know, hang it in the Louvre, Dave. Like November 13th CFP rankings, just it's a thing of beauty. And I mean, I'm with you. Like we knew there was going to be movement with Miami and Georgia both losing last weekend. And the committee, I mean, obviously they heard your pontificating on Saturday and they did not put the Bulldogs above Indiana. In fact, you have so much pull, they fall all the way to number 12. So way to go.
I will take full credit for that. I know the committee, ultimately the last decision-making process, and I don't think it's actually on their sheet, but I think we all know the last thing they do.
Phone a friend, Dave Revson.
Yeah, or they just watch the final drive. Like, what else are you going to do, right? You watch the final drive, you see what we had to say, and you adjust accordingly. The CFP rankings are a big story. Four of the top five, as I said, come from the Big Ten. It's the first time any conference has ever pulled that off. Now, remember, the top four seeds go to conference champs, so by definition, just one from each league. So even though the Big Ten has four of the five teams, it doesn't have four of the top five seeds. Oregon remains the top seed. The Ducks would get a bye. The other three would host home games, with Ohio State taking on Boise State, Penn State welcoming Ole Miss, and Alabama journeying to Bloomington to battle the Hoosiers. Please, please make that happen. We both thought Indiana was underrated last week. Ashley, they move up significantly in the rankings this week. You like where the Hoosiers are this week?
I love it. I love it. I mean, just, you know, you said it, like Indiana hosting Alabama in the college football playoff. Just the fact that we can say that sentence out loud as a real world possibility in week 12 just makes me smile. But I want to underscore what you mentioned off the top, Dave. Like, this is the first time in CFP history that one league has had four teams ranked in the top five in the same week. First time ever. So again, I know there are no banners hung for a November CFP ranking, but it's cool to see that representation. And I imagine, you know, Commissioner Petiti had a big smile on his face last night when they came out. But for IU, like, they put themselves in great position. You've got a bye to prepare for what will likely be one of the biggest games in program history next week in Columbus. And of course, if you're an IU fan, you want them to go out there, pull the upset, leave no doubt. But even I think, Dave, with a close loss, if they have a great showing, they're going to be fine. They're sitting in the top five right now, and they'd theoretically be 11-1 with their only loss on the road against the number 2 team. The big concern, obviously, is like their lack of top 25 wins and the fact that they'd probably be in some head-to-head debates with 2-loss SEC teams that do have some good wins on their resume. But I don't even want to go down that path because we don't need to put the cart in front of the horse. Hoosier fans, on November 13th, you are 10-0 for the first time ever. You are ranked in the top 5 in the CFP for the first time ever. So I just hope that they are all soaking this in and enjoying it, because it's a moment in time. And I think that, you know, they're going to be talking about this 2024 season for years to come. And Dave, even though the last thing I'll say that the, you know, performance against Michigan last week wasn't the best that we have seen from Curt Cignetti's group, they found a way. And at this time of year, as the pressure continues to mount and the games get bigger, that is all that really matters. So I love seeing the Hoosiers at number 5, and they've got everything in front of them.
And we cannot hold them to a different standard than other teams are held to. I mean, all of these teams have had games where at times they have underperformed. I mean, let's even just look at some of the Big Ten teams that are in the rankings. I mean, Ohio State was in a huge down-to-the-wire battle with Nebraska, and Indiana pummeled Nebraska. So kind of on a week-to-week basis, you don't always know exactly what you're going to get. But to your point, you win the game, and that's what matters. And I agree with you now that Indiana does have a bit of a buffer zone. So kind of regardless, I think, of what happens against Ohio State, as long as it's a reasonable and competitive game, I think you still see Indiana hanging around in those rankings. The one thing I would say about IU, and this isn't in any way to diminish Penn State, because I thought Penn State played as well as we've seen them play all year in that game against Washington. And you get into the comparing scores, and Penn State was much better against Washington than Indiana was against Washington. Indiana had a backup quarterback in that game. But I guess it's just a long way of saying, like, I think you could make an argument for Indiana ahead of Penn State. I think you're rewarding Penn State for kind of the close game that they played against Ohio State. They've kind of shown how they match up against top teams, which isn't an opportunity that Indiana's had. But again, like I think all of these Big Ten teams have been treated well. Again, can you quibble about one place here or there? Maybe. But I think they've all strengthened their case. I would certainly make an argument that Penn State looked a lot stronger last week than they had in previous weeks, and we saw that by them moving up.
Yeah, and the other thing to add on to that with Penn State, like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Penn State to finish 11-1, miss out on the Big Ten championship, and sit back and have some extra time, to prepare for a first-round playoff game that you get to host. I know this is all going to change, but just for the sake of argument, you look at their path. If the season ended today and Penn State, as you showed, they would host Ole Miss at Beaver Stadium, then play BYU. Like, given how close the Nittany Lions have been to making a playoff and having never made one, they are in a terrific position right now. And not going to Indy in some weird way may not end up being the worst thing. And I think, Dave, to me, that's what's interesting. We don't know a lot yet in this new playoff format, how it's all going to come together. But getting in with one loss and not playing in your conference championship, I think we will see some teams in that exact position that will make a run in this new format. I mean, we saw it in the 14 playoff. Alabama in 2017 won it all after not playing in the SEC championship. So that's what's, I think, fun about, not only are there so many more teams in the mix right now and all the people that thought that this was going to dilute the regular season, like I think it's just made this month of November even so much richer because we get to talk about so many more teams that are still in contention. But that's what's fun about this new format. There are going to be things that we aren't even thinking about right now that we'll look back and realize, you know what? Maybe it's not the end of the world to have one loss and go host a first round game in the playoff.
I'm with you on it's going to be really interesting to see how the loser of conference championship games is treated, because there is an accomplishment to getting there. To your point, Penn State needs a ton of help to get to the Big Ten championship game, right? They need a little bit of chaos because they've got that head-to-head loss against Ohio State. So Ohio State is ahead of them in the pecking order, and then we're Indiana to beat Ohio State. Kind of how does all that figure in? Indiana would be undefeated, so then all they'd have to do would be to beat Purdue, and they'd be in. So assuming Oregon doesn't lose, then Indiana, Oregon, obviously those two control their own destiny. So Penn State needs a lot of things to happen to have a shot. But to your point, I think you can make an argument that maybe that's not the worst thing in the world. What about the Buckeyes in there at number 2? It feels to me like, again, they're getting a ton of respect for the way that they played Oregon, the way that they played Penn State, obviously the close loss to Oregon, the win on the road, hostile atmosphere, Penn State. It feels like, again, Ohio State, I mean, you certainly can't complain about where they are. They're not going to be number 1 because they lost to number 1. So number 2 feels like the ideal spot for them.
Yeah, I think they're in a great position. And it's just a reminder, and we all do this every week, Dave, and I think football fans, that's what makes them fanatics. You have something happen like the Oregon loss and then followed by a win over Nebraska that nobody really felt good about. And it felt like the sky was falling in Columbus. And now here you are, and you're in an unbelievable position. You're ranked number 2. You look at who you've got left. You've got Northwestern at Wrigley on Big Ten Network this weekend. You've got that Indiana game we were talking about, and then Michigan. It's the hardest of any of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten in terms of remaining schedule. But they are right where, they need to be, I think. And ultimately, given all the pressure that you and I have talked about a lot that makes this season unique for the Buckeyes, they have found a way, I think, especially from that Oregon and Nebraska, those back-to-back weeks. I feel like they are just ascending. And Ryan Day talked about that they completely revamped the defense, and they've changed some different things. And I think it's the same way that I feel about Oregon. One of the best ways to evaluate a season is how much has a team improved over the course of 12 games. And, Dave, just to spin it forward to the Ducks, like I look at their offensive line as the great microcosm of this. They struggled mightily in their first 2 games. They were just named this week a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the best O-line in the nation. And that is the type of team that Dan Lanning has built. Like, they've had great offensive lines there before. Mario Cristobal, brought in a bunch of big-time talent during his time in Eugene. But I think given how they started the season, with all the sacks they were giving up, and how they evolved with that group, despite some injuries as of late, it's a big reason why Oregon is ranked number 1 undefeated, and also why Dylan Gabriel is a Heisman favorite. So that's, to me, I look at Oregon and Ohio State sitting there at 1 and 2, and it is about, they're on a collision course to meet again in Indianapolis and maybe again in the playoff for a third time this season. But I just think it's about how you evolve over the course of a season, and both of those teams have continued to take steps forward. Even given that the Ducks did not have their best game last week, they were still able to win, even when they're not at their best.
I do think that Oregon is among the most improved teams in the league. I mean, it'd be tough to argue UCLA isn't up there. They're getting dramatically better, as we've seen. But yes, I mean, we were in full-blown panic mode after those first 2 games against Idaho and Boise State. Again, in hindsight, Boise State is really good and ultimately might end up in the college football playoff. And we'll probably have the Doak Walker Award winner who might end up winning the Heisman. So, again, the part of the challenge of college football is you don't know what you don't know. And early on in the year, it's hard to really gauge. But Idaho is a team that they should have handled much more easily than they did. And now you think about kind of where we are, as you said, particularly with that offensive line, how much better that group has gotten here. And it is a testament to teams improve. Teams get better over the course of the year. I think Oregon waltzes into the Big Ten championship game. I don't want to sit here and jinx them. I think Wisconsin's, again, Camp Randall's a tough place to play. And Wisconsin is certainly capable of pulling off that upset, but it just feels like they're still figuring a lot of stuff out. And then I just don't see, with a bye week and all the excitement around this team and how good they are, I just don't see them losing at home to Washington, given how much Washington has struggled. I know it's a conference game, but away from home, Washington is very different than Washington at Husky Stadium. So I think Oregon's clearly in the best spot here. I think they have the easiest road ahead of them. And to your point, I think they've proven a ton to this point.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave. I'd co-sign on all that. And I think when, what's interesting about that Washington game, and we mentioned it on Saturday night as kind of the closing thought, but I look at that Washington game against Oregon and I look at Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan and Washington have a chance to, that will be their Super Bowls, like that game and their rivalry game. Can they go spoil something for the team that they most want to beat on any given season? So they, of course, will be dialed in and up for the challenge, and all the pressure will be on Oregon and Ohio State in those final regular season games. But I think particularly with the Ducks, Dan Lanning has never beat Washington. He was the Huskies were a thorn in their side the last couple of years, and especially in that Pac-12 championship game last year. Like that, there is all of the additional motivation. I am sure he's going to have whatever edge that he always does, whatever theme he always comes up for the week. It's going to be, as good as it's ever been on that final regular season game. So yeah, but like I said, we should frame this and hang it on the wall in your office, because it looks pretty darn good with 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5 right now.
Yeah, we'll request 2 copies, one for each one of us, just so we have access to it. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Oregon will have a ton of incentive in that Washington game, given the 2 games last year that kept them out of the college football playoff. The Joe Moore Award, given to the nation's top offensive line, named its 10 semifinalists. It's a group that includes 4 Big Ten teams: Oregon, Ohio State, Iowa, and Indiana. The 10-0 Hoosiers have had 5 games this year where they haven't allowed a sack, have had multiple rushing TDs in 9 of their 10 games. 164 of their designed runs have gone behind center Mike Katic. That is the most for any player in the Big Ten. And Mike Katic coincidentally joins us now for our big interview. Mike, congratulations on being nominated for the Joe Moore Award. What does that mean for you and your fellow offensive linemen?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I think it just goes to show how much work we put in. Credit to Coach Bostad, just getting us ready each week, and credit to the other 4 guys on the O-line with me that, work well together so greatly. And we all just love this position and love this team, and we'll do anything for this team. So just really excited to, be announced a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award.
You guys have a bye week this week. You have a reasonably large game looming against Ohio State, which we'll get to in just a moment. But tell me a little bit about what goes into a bye week.
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's getting our bodies healthy and refreshed for, our big game against Ohio State, but also just honing in on our fundamentals and our techniques. And, maybe if that's getting the younger guys some reps and kind of resting the older guys, that's, if that's what that takes, then then so be it. But we're still gonna, be in there working on our fundamentals and techniques with Coach Bostad and the rest of the offense.
Mike, I'm going to date myself just a little bit here, just for purposes of the next question. I went to my first Big Ten football game in 1975, and I've been following the league religiously ever since. And I can say with great certainty that game against Ohio State is going to be the biggest game that Indiana has been involved in my lifetime of following the Big Ten. I can't speak to 1967 and making it to the Rose Bowl and the games that went into that, but this will be the biggest game. How much have you guys thought about the enormity of what's coming down the line here?
It's all we think about. This after we beat Michigan, all our focus switches to Ohio State, and excuse me, we know the challenge that lies ahead of us. I've played Ohio State, in the last 5 years. So I know the challenges that come with playing Ohio State, especially at the shoe. So, we have a team that has a chip on our shoulder, and we're just really excited to play Ohio State and that opportunity that presents itself in Columbus.
Where does that chip on your shoulder come from?
Just the amount of adversity that not only me, but, the team has been through and this university has been through the past 3 years. We haven't had the best teams these past 3 years, and we haven't had the best offensive line. So that chip, it's a pretty big chip on my shoulder, and we got something to prove.
This team is very transfer heavy, as obviously has been well documented. Do you think it means more to you, or that you, maybe it doesn't mean more, but that you view it differently, the success that you guys are having this year, due to the fact that you've been at IU your entire career?
I think so, a little bit, because, I've been through the ups and downs of Indiana football. I've been here in 19 and 20 when, we were a really good team, and then in 21 to 23 when we just, weren't clicking. So, being a guy that has been through all this and has finally, broken through to, a really good start to the season, and it's everything I ever wanted coming back for my 6th year, and I'm so happy I made that decision.
What has it been like? I mean, to run out to Memorial Stadium and to see the stands completely packed with cream and crimson, with IU fans, people falling all over themselves to get tickets, particularly given the context of what you said, of what it was like in previous years. And of course, the one really, really good year was the COVID year, where there was no one in the stadium for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
So what has that meant to you these last few home games?
It's meant everything to me. And I try to, at least once a game, kind of stand back and just take it all in. And just, because being from, in 2021 and 2022, the stands being maybe a third of the way filled, maybe a fourth, and now people fighting over tickets and, trying to get these tickets that are, hard to come by. And it's just, I like to stand back, and usually after we get the win, just stand back and relax and just look at the stands, take a look around, look at the towels waving. The fans just, it's these fans have been yearning for a football team that they can get behind and they can really cheer for. And I'm just so happy to be a part of that team. And we have the best fans in the country.
And you almost weren't a part of it. I mean, you were exploring your NFL options after last year. Tell me about the conversations that you had with Coach Bostad, the offensive line coach, and with Coach Signetti when he got the job that convinced you to come back.
Yeah, it was kind of really quick and a fast process, but it was a Wednesday morning in late December, and Coach Bostad called me and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity for you to come back and play center. This will improve your versatility, help you at the next level, if anything." And then, I talked to Sig and I talked to my family, and we just found out that this would be the best decision for me moving forward and for my future. So it was a no-brainer for me to come back, and I'm so happy I did.
I know there was an instant bond with Coach Signetti over your Pittsburgh roots, which you guys share. A fellow Yinzers, as I know you refer to one another.
Yeah.
For those who are uninitiated, could you use the word Yins in a sentence?
Yes. Yins want to go down. Yins want to go downtown to the Steelers game.
Okay, so yins is a plural referring to
Yes.
other people.
It's like
Use
y'all.
guys or y'all?
Yeah, use guys or y'all, but it's just yins. Like yins guys. My dad says yins guys want to head down to the Steelers game down on the north side. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about Coach Sig because he is an interesting character, to say the least. When he went to that basketball game, and how shall I put this? He expressed his personal viewpoints about the relative merits of Purdue and Ohio State and Michigan. I think that's maybe the most polite way to say it. What did you think about what he had said?
Well, we've never had this kind of, rustling of the feathers, per se, of the Big Ten. And, I mean, I was sitting – I think I wasn't even watching the game. I might have seen it on Twitter or something after, or X or after. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to get behind this guy because that's something we need. We need, heads to turn. We need things like that to happen, and it was funny, but I think it was his way of just rustling up the feathers and saying, hey, here I am. I'm coming for it all, and I'm not taking the backseat to nobody, and he hasn't so far.
That is for sure. Hey, Mike, I do want to ask you, I know you've talked about this a lot. We did a Journey piece on it as well, but tell us about, you were growing up, and you had great admiration for your sister, and she did gymnastics and figure skating and ballet dancing, and you did all of those with her for a brief period of time to hang out with her. Which were you the best at? Like, which of those three pursuits has been most deprived of your greatness and ability due to the fact that you gave them up for football?
Humbly, I want to say none of the above because, there was nothing good about anything that was going on in the ice or anything. Maybe gymnastics. I can still kind of do a backflip like into the pool and like off a diving board and things like that. So I think maybe I've used some of that athletic ability has transferred over a little bit, but not much.
I'd like to see you on the pommel horse. I think I'd give some.
I think there's got to be a weight limit on that thing.
Hey, I know you've got in the NIL store, you've got this great T-shirt that's for sale. I want to ask you a little bit about the moment. This is a really beautiful likeness of you.
Yeah.
Tell me about the moment of triumph at which this picture was taken.
So this was actually taken by my roommate, Trey Walker, in the locker room after we beat Wisconsin last year.
Okay.
And it was kind of just I used Carter Smith's Pit Viper sunglasses. I put them on and I just put my hands up and let the barrel gut hang out and Trey snapped a photo, and then it didn't really gain any traction until Mackenzie Holmes tweeted it after the UCLA game, and then it just took over and went viral. So I decided to try to make a shirt out of it and capitalize on the moment.
I can see why it has taken off because it is a true work of art and a thing of beauty. We mentioned bye week this week. What's your plan for watching football?
Hang out with the boys. Maybe there was some talks of golfing. We'll see. But just hanging out with the guys, getting around everyone and watching good games and just hanging out.
All right. Well, let me just say, I hope Yins all have a good weekend together. How did I do with that? Was that
I
good?
appreciate that.
Yeah. Proper context. All right. Mike Katic, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Best of luck against the Buckeyes, and thanks for spending some time with us. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
And it would be hard to disagree with that. Dave Revson, Ashley Adamson back with you. And I think Dave Urban's point about the blueprint at Oregon was well made. And to me, in terms of how they want to play, if you boil it down to one word, it's physicality. Like that is always Dan Lanning's goal. is to be the more physical team. And as you look at their game against Wisconsin this weekend, it's interesting because physicality and toughness is exactly what Luke Fickell talked about in his press conference this week. And he said, look, we had to take a really hard look in the mirror during the bye week and ask those questions. Are we physical enough? Are we tough enough? Because as we saw, when you give up 330 rushing yards, which is what they gave up to Iowa in their last game, those are the questions that you probably need to answer. So I know, Dave, you said that you expect Oregon to be able to take care of business, but what interests you, intrigues you in this matchup on Saturday at Camp Randall?
I do think that Wisconsin will be a highly motivated team. I mean, Luke Fickell described what happened against Iowa as kind of your worst nightmare. And I get that. Like, Luke Fickell is a fabulous coach. I have the utmost respect for him. We obviously date back to his time at Ohio State, saw him have incredible success at Cincinnati. Like, I do believe that Luke Fickell is going to figure this thing out at Wisconsin, and I think he's going to have his team ready to go. Again, I just think Oregon is better, and that's the stuff that Urban was diagnosing there, which is just how well this team plays, how connected they are. I just think the way that Dan Lanning has brought that defensive toughness, the notion of hiring a defensive coach, and he's not the first one they've hired, obviously, at Oregon. They've had a couple guys with defensive backgrounds. But the idea of leaning into the thing that I think people don't think of historically as the strength for Oregon. I think historically of offense and how innovative they've been offensively. And so to kind of lean into this defensive blueprint while maintaining the strong offense, I mean, this is what gets you on the pace they're at. And the fact that they've got the longest streak of scoring 30 or more points in the country going, 9 straight games. So when you pair a historically good defense, they're on pace to be their best scoring defense ever, a fraction of a point ahead of last year's defense, and you pair that with this offense, it's a tough combination to beat. In fact, it's been impossible to beat so far.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things, it's so easy to get caught up in sort of the, I don't want to say the minutia, but the X's and O's. But this was like pulling back and looking from the 30,000 foot view. This was one of the games that caught my eye when the schedule first came out months ago. Of course, obviously, it would feel bigger if the Badgers had a better record, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Oregon, Wisconsin, like, it feels like we're previewing a Rose Bowl right now, which I love. And obviously, their last 2 meetings did come in the Rose Bowl. Both were classic games, I think especially enjoyable if you were an Oregon fan. And I remember how special, especially that 2020 Rose Bowl was for the Ducks. Justin Herbert, it was his last game as an Oregon Duck. He caps his, incredible Oregon career with 3 rushing touchdowns and MVP performance. And it really was sort of that storybook ending to, what is one of the most beloved Ducks in program history. I certainly, Dave, didn't think that the next time that they would be playing each other would be as conference foes in Madison 5 years later. But here we are, and I think it's terrific. It's going to be a great atmosphere. And Oregon, of course, will get the Badgers' best shot, and I am sure that they will be ready for it. So looking forward to that one. And I just think, again, when you step back and you think about what this season and each week, just some of the different matchups that we play, it's special.
I agree with you. I think this is going to be, again, atmosphere-wise, I think there's going to be a ton of enthusiasm, as there always is, surrounding the Badgers. Look, if they can avoid the turnovers, part of the issue has been, Braden Locke's turned the ball over in every game he started. Can you avoid the turnovers? Can you maybe figure out a way to control the ball a little bit better than they have? But to your point, Ash, it's just weird to think about the way they were run over in particular in that last game. I know there's people fixate on offense, and I think I'm as guilty of it as anyone, and particularly when you look at Wisconsin and kind of what they've done to overhaul the offensive philosophy and going to the air raid with Phil Longo. But the real identity of Wisconsin, it has been great running games through the years, I get that, but it's also been outstanding defense, and the defense just isn't up to the level that they need it to be either. So they're going to have to improve dramatically on both sides of the ball from what we saw last time for them to have a fighting chance here against the Ducks.
They sure are. And Luke Fickell is 7-2 all time coming off the bye. So looking forward to how that one plays out. Looking forward to the rest of the show. Plenty more football ahead. And An important opportunity this weekend for 4 Big Ten teams trying to become bowl eligible. Nebraska, Rutgers, Washington, and Wisconsin all knocking on the door, sitting at 5 wins. Worth noting, Michigan also has 5 wins, but they are on the bye as we welcome you back one final time to this Wednesday edition of Big Ten Today. And it is now time for our highest rated segment every week, Dave, the 4 we are looking for, which storylines intrigue us most heading into Saturday. And I'll just go ahead and bat leadoff and start with one of the teams that I just mentioned trying to get to bowl eligibility. The Washington Huskies are coming off their worst loss under Jed Fish, 35-6 at Penn State. And that was after a big win over USC. So it seems like they've sort of taken one step forward and one step back, still trying to figure out how to win on the road. But how about this, Dave? After playing in the whiteout, the Huskies are calling for a blackout. They are wearing all black uniforms for the first time in 5 years when they host UCLA on Friday night. It is their final home game, and they've asked fans to wear all black. So, I mean, I just love these uniforms. Should be an awesome environment. And you know that I can't get through one of these segments, Dave, without at least bringing up something about what some team is going to be wearing this weekend. It's too predictable.
Fashion is important. They also are playing at home, which is important too, because as we know, they've been a lot better there. In fact, have the second longest home win streak in the country behind only Georgia. I'm going to keep it on the West Coast as well. The USC-Nebraska game, I'm really interested to see how Jade Mayava plays for USC. I do not think that Miller Moss was the only reason that USC has been struggling and has lost all these close games, but he's certainly part of the reason. He absolutely did not play well last time out. I understand the rationale behind making a change. I mean, Mayava put together a fabulous year last year at UNLV. He led the Mountain West in pass efficiency. He threw for more than 3,000 yards. He's also a really capable runner, Ashley. And let's be honest, they need a capable runner because the offensive line has had a lot of problems at USC. So to me, this makes sense. Let's see what Mayava can do. I think it then informs your decision moving forward as to whether you go into the portal and look for another quarterback or whether you feel like you have your quarterback of the future in Mayava.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, I'm with you. I think this is such an interesting game for so many reasons. New quarterback for USC. And how about a new offensive coordinator for Nebraska? And that's what I'm most interested in. What will the Huskers look like with Dana Holgorsen coming in and calling plays? It was kind of a big news bomb that Matt Rule dropped in his press conference on Monday, so much so that people aren't even talking about the fact that he mentioned that Dylan Raiola may not play in this game. I think the question is always, when you make a change like this, how much change can you actually make at this point? You can't install a new offense in week 12, but what wrinkles can he throw in? How will he try to set up Raiola or whoever is playing at quarterback for success? Because, you know, I think that's the thing when you look at Raiola. He has not made the strides everyone was expecting based on how the season began. One other fun note on the timing of this one, Lincoln Riley and Dana Holgorsen are very good friends. They coached together at Texas Tech, and they have coached against each other several times. So bringing in a guy who understands how Lincoln Riley thinks, I guess I just wouldn't be surprised if Holgorsen also stops by a few defensive meetings this week in Lincoln as well, Dave.
Interesting. It's a crazy story. I mean, you bring in a guy for a week, basically, just, hey, come on in, take a look at our offense, think if there are ways that you might be able to improve it. And then the next thing you know, he is the offensive coordinator. So it's pretty wild. And again, they made it clear, hey, we're not going to be run the air raid. We're not going to change everything. We're just going to try to fit it into what we already do. And obviously, Raiola's health, a huge concern as well. Last one for me is football at Wrigley Field. I always think this is cool. I think back to 14 years ago, the first time that Northwestern did this. They had a game against Illinois, and they determined the night before that the end zone was too close to the outfield wall, and they were going to have to play the entire game in one direction. And I just remember getting a phone call from a very distraught athletic director, Jim Phillips, who he had put so much time and energy into this, and he just wanted it to be seen as such a positive thing, and he was so disappointed at kind of what had happened with that. They've now rectified it. There's enough room in the outfield. They used to have both teams on the same sideline. This was up until last year when they played Iowa. Now they'll be on opposing sidelines, so can't wait to see it.
I'm excited. I love those images, and I love that Tailgate's going to be there and that our whole crew is going to be there, and that I get to be with you taking it all in.
Yes, we will have a ton of fun for sure on Saturday. We look forward to seeing you here on the Big Ten Network as we run through another great week of football.